It looked like there was a disco going on in the room, you know, blue lights flashing, flashing, flashing.
Police are at the home of 48-year-old Ildiko Bettison following reports of a violent attack.
The police arrived very quickly. They went upstairs to the bedroom.
Ildiko is laid diagonally face up across the bed. She's got bruising on her. She's not breathing.
Officers notice bruises on Ildiko's thigh and lip. She also has a black eye.
They need to be sure that she's dead, and so they're there establishing how long she's not been breathing for, all aimed to whether there is a possibility still of reviving Ildiko.
But at 2 minutes past 2 a.m, Ildiko is pronounced dead. And her husband Keith has news for officers at the scene.
Bettison is admitting that he has killed Ildiko.
He says, "I've killed her. I killed the bitch. I couldn't stand it anymore."
Police arrest Keith Bettison on suspicion of murder. Investigators then piece together the likely cause of death. They're soon aware of reddening around the victim's neck.
Ildiko had some scratches just here, which were almost certainly her trying to pull someone's arm that was round her neck, trying to pull that away. And so some evidence that she fought for her life, and she died from strangulation.
On news of her mother's death, Ildiko's daughter Judy makes her way to the house.
I was at my friend's house. My dad calls me, and he's crying. He's like, "My mum, she's dead." I'm in complete, panic, shock. I don't even remember driving. Get back to my house. My friend said, "Don't go inside, stay here." And I'll go in, let me check what's going on. And then she comes out and she starts crying. And she's just like, "I'm so sorry. It's true." And I don't know, I just felt numb, in shock.
I'm watching out of my bedroom window, and all of a sudden she was pulled out in a body bag. I was just shocked. That's all I can say.
Then she's just gone. So quick. You don't get to say goodbye, and you know that you love them.
Police may believe they have a killer under arrest, but it soon emerges Keith Bettison will plead not guilty to murder. How will detectives and prosecutors convince a jury to convict? Kate Becks will lead the case for the prosecution.
Telling the story is important in almost every case. There's always a narrative behind the actions that somebody's taken. And it might at first blush appear quite straightforward, but there's always more to it than that.
As investigators dig into Ildiko's story, they learn of her Eastern European origins, born on the 21st of March, 1972.
So Ildiko is a Hungarian national, born in Hungary, in a small village right to the northeast of Hungary, very close, in fact, to the Ukrainian border.
So how did Ildiko end up in Chessington, England?
Ildiko, aged 22, moves over to the UK from Eastern Hungary, and very quickly into her move, she meets Keith Bettison. They quickly strike up a long-term romantic relationship, despite the fact that Bettison is 24 years older than Ildiko. And he's been married before, whereas this is one of Ildiko's first long-term relationships.
They were married and lived in southwest London.
And after 4 years, they have a child together.
What can the couple's daughter Judy tell investigators about family life?
Childhood was pretty good. Parents were loving, caring, attentive. I grew up in Kingston, in southwest London. My dad was a bus driver. My mum would take me on the bus when Dad was driving. Sometimes we'd spend the whole day on the bus with him, and then on his lunch we'd get food together, get back on. I used to quite enjoy it, just riding around. Had my little CD player and put my music on. My mum didn't work, but she would take me to ballet, karate, anything really. She would be there. Mum was quite a caring person. She was a giver. I think she wanted me to be happy, enjoy life.
You know, she could not do enough for you, you know, because that was the kind of woman she was. She had a big heart, massive heart, you know. Every day I saw her, every day. She became my best friend.
I would go round there quite often. I would even have my Christmas dinner with them.
My dad, just a joker, you know. Like to have a mess around, make a joke, carefree. Just took life as it was, like, not stressed, you know, but caring.
Keith was a lovely guy as well. They were a lovely couple.
But are appearances deceptive? Not everything is as simple as it may seem.
An aspect of the relationship, and quite a significant aspect of the relationship, was always bound to be the fact that Ildiko never spoke really fluent English. So she was always dependent on him for communication.
Mum was quite self-conscious, and I think with English being her second language, she was never confident speaking it, which is why she never really got a job, because she was embarrassed that people would think she's funny for not pronouncing things correctly or speaking correctly.
She wasn't able to communicate easily, and that of itself is very alienating. That sets you apart, makes you very dependent on the few people who you do know. And also he was the sole breadwinner, so she found herself in a situation where she was dependent on him both financially and emotionally, and her world was then quite small.
He was a very old-fashioned man, you know. He worked all day. He expected to be waited on. She'd go to Kingston and she'd be out all day buying her shopping, and she'd come back and she'd cook his dinner, and that was Ildie every day. Every day she went out, waited on him hand and foot.
He had a solid job to the financial insecurity of the family in Hungary. Certainly he would send money. One of the relatives used the expression the big man. I think he enjoyed the dependency. I think he enjoyed being the sole breadwinner. I think he enjoyed a level of control that came with that. He was the provider.
I started seeing how quite demanding he was. She was talking to her friend at the door. "Where's my dinner?" I felt embarrassed for her, you know, and she'd go, "Okay, darling, I'm coming. Then you started seeing the cracks in someone's relationship, you know.
In 2009, tragedy befalls Ildiko.
Her sister dies of breast cancer, and this really impacts on Ildiko and on her mental health.
She got quite badly depressed for a few years after that, but then came out of it and was a bit better, but I think it always affected her. She wasn't the same after.
Bettison isn't very supportive. He doesn't help her when really all she needs is help.
Keith Bettison has a way of ignoring his wife's insecurities.
I think Mum got quite jealous of Dad. He's quite a friendly person, you know, so if they went out for dinner and he was friendly with the waitress, you know, she'd get a bit jealous, and I think that really affected her. Just not feeling good enough. One thing that matters to my mum might not be a big deal for my dad, but I think in a relationship that's where you need to communicate.
In 2015, Judy goes to university.
My mum and dad drove me up to my room or my flat, with all my stuff, helped me unpack. At this point, it was fine.
But not long after Zsuzsa's moved out to go to university, the relationship between Ildiko and Bettison starts breaking down. They're not communicating well, and also she's starting to become reliant on alcohol.
She began drinking more, he began drinking more, and that meant that the arguments between them escalated. They became more out of control and everything degenerated.
He liked whiskey and she was a gin drinker. And he used to go, and he used to start singing, and he used to do this. I said it was punching Judy. He used to do this, and he used to wind her up. And you could hear him mocking her, winding her up.
As police look for evidence to one day convince a jury of his guilt, they learn that Bettison's abuse extends beyond words.
It's after I left uni is when things started. Things were happening.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Understanding the dynamic between Keith and Ildiko helps police build a profile of their suspect. Inquiries reveal how alcohol plays a significant role in the world of Mr. and Mrs. Bettison.
Him and Hildy, they had a drink problem together. And I stopped going around there because I couldn't keep up with them anymore.
Her world is pretty much at home, and that's really pretty much it. And she would be drinking first thing in the morning, throughout the day, and with not an awful lot else to do other than to stew over what was going on in her life.
More will emerge about the truth of the marriage. Ildiko's diary is found, revealing a secret. Has Keith been having an affair?
Ildiko believes that Bettison has been cheating on her, and by 2018, Ildiko and Bettison's relationship is beginning to suffer.
I think she was very jealous of him, and she always used to accuse him of having an affair.
There were heartbreaking diary entries that Ildiko made in part Hungarian and part broken English, along the lines of, does he still fancy her? Does he want to be with her? Does he prefer her to me? Is she the only person that he's been unfaithful with?
The diary tells investigators that Keith Bettison does little to quell his wife's fears.
Reading diary entries, the picture that emerged was very much of someone who, rather than pouring oil on troubled water, fanned the flames. He was goading her, teasing her about her insecurity, about his sexual infidelity.
I feel like Dad maybe could have not done more, but maybe could have done things to put her mind at ease. I think my mum needed probably a bit more love to make her feel secure.
And I'm afraid it probably made him feel big and good about himself for her to be insecure. It showed how, even though he was, I think, 20-odd years older than Ildiko, she was the one who was insecure about their relationship. He probably enjoyed that sort of power. So really playing on her insecurity. And that, of course, then blew everything sky high. So then there would be these alcohol-fueled arguments that were very ugly and were sometimes physical, and developed into domestic violence, with him bruising her on occasion.
I didn't think that he was abusive, until I actually started hearing it back in 2018. They would have a barbecue and he'd put his music on and he'd sit out there and you could hear him, like, the so-called Punch and Judy voice. Wait, what you doing, you silly bitch, and all this stuff, and it was like mocking. He'd be in the garden and she'd be up in the bedroom and he'd be shouting. So all of a sudden you could hear it. Another time, to hear this screaming, he'd shut her out in the garden in her underwear. And I can see him, and he's going like that to her, and all this, like a child. He was a 70-year-old man. I did say to her, Ildy, leave him. He's a bully. Nothing to be ashamed of. He should be ashamed, not you. It just escalated.
Indeed, records show that in March 2019, Keith Bettison is arrested.
In 2019, Ildiko reports an act of violence by Bettison to the police.
So the first thing I remember is one day my mum calling me out the blue, just saying they've had a fight and Dad's been arrested. And I was like, what?
Ildiko described to two friends particularly nasty argument where he had put his arm around her neck, throttling her.
It's a major discovery in the bid to gather the facts needed in any murder trial of Keith Bettison. The post-mortem reveals Ildiko's killer used a chokehold on her.
The pathologist then independently said, the medical evidence leads me to believe that the mechanism for strangulation was a neck hold rather than hands either side.
Bettison's arrest causes conflict and confusion in the family.
I was more worried about my dad. I was quite angry towards my mum. I was more concerned that Dad would get into trouble for something that he didn't deserve to be in trouble for. He works hard and to support my mum and support me. And the thought of him, potentially going to prison, I just didn't think it was fair.
What's interesting about the first reported incident of violence in this relationship is that it's the financial dependence of Ildiko on Bettison that eventually leads her to withdraw this allegation.
They dropped the charges. Mum didn't want to press charges. He came home.
But once Keith Bettison returns home, the drinking gets worse.
My dad called me, asked me if I could move home to help with Mum, because she was struggling, and he was like, I might give her some focus. I moved home. And that's when I really started to notice how bad it really was, I think.
By this point, both of them are abusing alcohol.
Ildiko was definitely an alcoholic. In my view, Keith Bettison was also an alcoholic.
I've been round there before and he can't even stand up. She was as bad. She used to drink like a fish as well. She used to drink a bottle of wine in the morning straight away and all that. She was quite a heavy drinker.
There'd be some days she might come into my room and she might ask me to come into bed with her, and we'd put TV on and we just sort of lay there together, watch TV. She'd hold my hand, and touch my hair and say things like, oh, yeah, so beautiful, I wish my hair was like yours. She felt so sad and depressed that the only thing that made her feel better was drinking. She'd go through near enough a bottle of gin a day. I'd wake up, go to work, and she'd ask me to pour her a drink before I left, which a lot of the time I refused to do. But she'd beg me, please, I can't do it. Please, just the one, I need it.
Keith Bettison would try to encourage her to cut down, but I don't imagine that it would ever be successful trying to get an alcoholic off booze while their partner is still drinking. And he was a functioning alcoholic.
I just felt sad, and because you can't fix something like alcoholics, you can't just stop drinking and then you're all better. It's bigger than that.
The taunting and violence does not stop, and other suspicious things happen to Ildiko at the Bettison house.
I took her to hospital a couple of times. She said she fell down the stairs. Ildy was very insecure, and he made her feel insecure. He had the audacity to turn around the night she went to the hospital. He said, oh, me and Debbie were in my house on our own together. And I didn't find out about this until months later. And I said, Ildiko, never, but he made her believe that something went on between me and Keith.
Keith Bettison had also put his hands around her neck on occasion. Any sort of restriction of a person's airway by somebody in an argument, that's an absolute red flag.
In March 2020, the warring and often drunk Mr. and Mrs. Bettison are forced to spend more time with each other.
Lockdown happens, and instead of being out of the house for most of the day, suddenly Keith is at home all day. They were unfortunately part of an also pretty large group of people who struggled with their mental health. They drank more.
I don't think that helped, because Dad wasn't working. He was furloughed. The weather was good, so barbecues, alcohol, just a recipe for arguments and fighting.
It was constant shouting, screaming, and you wouldn't have thought that them two people could have done that. Ildiko, she did stick up for herself now and again, don't blame her.
Lockdown restrictions are lifted by June, but Bettison does not return to work.
I thought that he was just told not to go in because of his age and COVID and all that. And I said, Keith not working. Ildiko told me. She said, no. I said, why? She said, he crashed the bus.
Bettison is about to be sacked for gross misconduct, and before that can happen, he leaves his job.
Quite a good proportion of income was going on booze, and he was now on a pension because he'd then left work, and the pension wasn't as much as his income had been, so he was now a considerable drop in income, and for the first time in a very long time, having been financially secure, they now had money worries.
There was a significant escalation of violence between Ildiko and Bettison, and we do often see that in cases of domestic violence, where when external situations become harder and worse, then the violence can escalate and become more extreme if both parties are still involved in the relationship.
I remember one time, it was pretty bad, and I think where they'd fallen back on the stairs together, Mum hit her back and she was screaming in pain. My house was screaming at Dad, just to let go, just let her go, let her go. Just stop fighting, just stop fighting. That's my one moment I won't forget.
At this point, Ildiko is battling depression.
I've been in the house and she's flown at him. She's actually gone with her fists at him, everything. I've seen that happen. I've been in the house when that's happened. I've had the police come round here in the past and they've asked me to put him up for the night to get away from her.
I was there for the worst. Some moments I was angry, I hated them. Some moments I was scared because I didn't want to lose my mum from the drinking. Sometimes I was just fed up. Felt like I was the adult to two children, but they were my parents. Just telling my dad to move out. Like, Dad, just go live somewhere else. Who wants to tell their parents to basically just break up?
Police records reveal how matters come to a head with another violent incident.
I'm at work, and my dad calls me. We've had a fight. Your mum's called the police. Just let you know. I was like, great. I said, look, Dad, when they get there, just tell them to call me, just so I can explain what's been going on. Because, if they turn up and my mum said, oh, he's been beating me up, the first thing they're going to do is to take him away. But I was like, they need to know the context of what's been going on for the last year. So the police got there, and then one of them called me. And I was just explaining, what's been going on, my mum's drinking, the fights. if he goes to prison, he can't work, can't start a new job, he can't pay our rent, pay our bills, and, it didn't seem fair. And they actually ended up arresting my mum.
In an unexpected twist, it is Ildiko who is charged with common assault.
She, couldn't come home. And I was fairly happy, to be honest. I thought, well, this will do some good. Can't come home. Dad, can just chill out, take a breather. So Mum went to go stay with a friend of ours. She was like, why have you done this? I said, Mum, I've not done anything. I've not pressed any charges. Like, they're deciding to do it themselves.
But one neighbour reveals that it's Keith who often ignites the rows.
Shashika never really saw what really went on, and I don't blame that girl because she's a child. She shouldn't have seen any of it at the end of the day. What he would do while Shashika was out, he would wind Ildy up to the point where she was at. When Shashika come in, it looked like it was Mum that was doing it. But he'd sit there go, and then Ildy, would literally be going absolutely crazy, like, leave me alone, stop picking on me, leave me alone, that's all you could hear her say. I said, why don't you leave him? Just because I love him. He knew what he was doing.
A week after, my dad called me and he was like, I think we should withdraw our statements from the police and they'd drop the charges and Mum could come home. And I was quite hesitant. I said, I don't know. I don't want things to go back to how they were. But Dad withdrew his statement. I decided to withdraw my statement. And I think the next day she comes home. And she's a bit frosty, I'm a bit frosty. I just said to my mum, I said, it just needs to stop, like something needs to change. And then, nothing changed. Still fighting every night.
Investigators have now gathered compelling evidence of the suspect's toxic and violent goading. As the picture of a killer builds, Bettison's behaviour just a week before the murder rings alarm bells for neighbours.
Neighbours said that Bettison was almost unrecognisable. They said that he'd gone from being quite happy-go-lucky and being able to be heard whistling around the house to suddenly aggressively demanding money that was owed to him from the neighbours and really becoming quite outwardly angry and violent. In October of 2020, Debbie May opens the door to Ildiko, who's showing her that she's got a black eye. She's saying that Bettison has punched her and she's drunk and swaying from side to side. But before Debbie May can do anything about it, Ildiko runs back into her own house.
The evidence from the neighbours was that, they're arguing again. Ildiko would be seeking reassurance, not in a way that would be very easy to deal with. She would be drunk and she would be shouting at Keith through drink, and he would mock her and mimic her, imitate her voice, her accent, tease her about that, and it would just be like lighting the touch paper.
Investigators piece together details of events that lead to the night of Ildiko's murder.
It was about 20 past 11. She knocked on the door. My mother was here at the time, and she was very close to my mum. My mum loved her. She came in, and she was very, very drunk, but she had a nightie on and she didn't have any underwear on. And she come in with black eyes, black and blue, and she lifted her shirt up and showed my mum. My mum said, I'm gonna go in there and I'll bloody give him what for, But I just said, Mum, it's no point. I mean, even my mum turned round and said, Ildy, leave him. But she said, but I love him. We told her to stay here. My mum said, please stay here, Ildy, please stay here. But she didn't want to. I said, Ildy, somebody's going to end up dead. And that's my exact words to her. She'd gone to go back home, but he wouldn't answer the door. So I've gone out into the garden and shouted up in the bed, like, Keith, I still needs to get him. Oh, okay, love, yeah, all like that, because he was drunk. And my mum saw her out, and eventually Keith answered the door. And as she's about to walk away, she heard Keith go, get in here, show me up like that.
Just before midnight, that was the last time that Debbie May would see Ildiko alive.
I've gone up to bed and I never heard nothing.
An hour later, at 1 a.m, Zuzika is at a friend's house. She receives a phone call.
It was my dad. Initially, before I answered, I thought, oh, here we go again. They've had another fight. That's what I was expecting. But he was crying and I was, Dad, you okay? Calm down, what's going on? He's just like, oh, I've killed her.
Keith Bettison has brutally strangled his wife, Ildiko, and then proceeds to do the housework.
The evidence is that immediately after the killing, Keith Bettison then took one of the bins out, put something in the washing machine. Probably about half an hour passed, and then he called Zuzika. He said words to the effect of, "I've killed your mother."
I'm shouting like, okay, we've got to go back to my house. I don't remember. Like, speeding, don't know. You know, looking in my mirrors, don't know.
Bettison calling his daughter first is really layered because on one hand, it's absolutely not something that he should have involved his daughter in any way, and that first phone call should have just been to the police. But I think what Bettison's trying to do is he's trying to get Zuzika on side because he knows that she understands what's been going on in their relationship and in their home. He knows that Zuzika's also been on his side before when there's been an issue of violence by Ildiko. And so I think immediately from the get-go, he's trying to make her understand what's happened.
It's just a bit like you're in a dream. Just doesn't seem real.
Zuzika's friend Olivia is with her for support.
When Olivia and Zuzika get to the house, Olivia goes ahead into the home where she finds Bettison repeatedly saying the same sentences, saying that he's killed Ildiko. He says that she's upstairs and Olivia goes up to see what's happened.
Ildiko is unresponsive and laid across the bed. Yet Bettison has not called for an ambulance.
She's asking what happened, and Keith Bettison is volunteering. He's saying, "I killed the bitch," and he refers to her using that sort of language.
But he makes sure to say to Olivia at that point, you know how horrible she's been in recent weeks. He's already trying to mitigate his actions before anyone even really knows what's happened.
She says, "You didn't have to do that. The door was right there. You could just have left."
Olivia takes Bettison to the phone to make sure he calls the police.
Then, within minutes, I've never seen so many police cars, ambulances. They're rushing inside. All I can hear is, you know, where is she, where is she? While I'm just standing outside, doing nothing.
Bettison's behaviour at the scene baffles officers and first responders.
Whilst Bettison starts off being quite upfront and compliant when the emergency services arrive, as soon as they start to try and resuscitate Ildiko, his attitude changes. He becomes very belligerent, very angry, verbally aggressive towards emergency services, and he keeps on repeating, "She's dead, what more do you need to know?"
Well, I saw him actually being cocky and aggressive towards the police, like as if he got done for drink driving or something. You know, you just killed your wife. Then I said to the police, I knew something like this was going to happen. I knew it was just waiting for it. I knew that it wasn't going to end well.
Bettison's neighbour sees him led away in handcuffs.
And I just looked at him and I thought, oh, Zuzika. Obviously, she was in the car and what did you say in a situation like that?
They take my dad straight away. I've not even had a chance to say anything to him. I'm literally like, he's gone.
Within hours, Keith Bettison is charged with his wife's murder. Working closely with prosecutor Kate Becks, detectives then build a compelling case rooted in his confessions, a history of assaults, and his chillingly consistent method of harm, the chokehold. Just a year later, he stands trial. It appears Bettison accepts that he's caused the death of his wife, but will that be enough to secure a murder conviction?
There was never any doubt over whether he had done the act, but his defence was accident, self-defence, lack of intent, hadn't intended to cause her serious injury, let alone kill. During an event like that, one of them's dead, only leaving one person. I think that leaves quite an open goal for them to say what they want to and to write whatever narrative they want, which can make it very difficult, in fact, for the prosecution to establish what the truth actually was.
Kate Bex leads the case for the prosecution. She calls the couple's daughter, Judy, as a witness.
Judy is in a position that is impossible to imagine, really. She's lost effectively both parents. And when I met her, as we do with all witnesses before we call them, but particularly with somebody in that position, I'm saying to her, I'm obviously prosecuting this murder. I'm prosecuting your father. And I just need to establish from her whether she is going to give evidence in accordance with her witness statement. And she was. She was true to the statement that she'd given to the police in the course of the investigation, which really just dealt with the relationship between her mother and father.
Judy tells the court about her parents' drunken rows.
I just think something happened one night and it went too far. And my dad has to live with that guilt. My dad has to live with what he's done. And I know he already feels terrible for me, and he says it all the time. You know, it's my fault, you know, I put you in this situation.
The jury now hears from Ildiko's friends, who tell the court of Bettison's deadly chokeholds. Ildiko described them to friends just weeks before the final attack.
So upstairs in their bedroom, during a row, the same neck hold, so his arm around her neck, using the lever that you can when you use a neck hold, and he throttled her.
In court, the pathologist reveals Ildiko had hemorrhages in her eyelids. According to experts, it's evidence that Bettison held his chokehold for up to half a minute.
So not a momentary loss of control, where he then came to his senses and released the hold and let her go and she recovers. Not like that. No, he had her in a neck hold and held on, and he kills her.
It takes just 4 hours for the jury to reach their verdict. Guilty.
He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 14 years. And that's because the judge said that he recognised that this was not premeditated and was an action out of anger rather than pre-planned. He did, however, say that Bettison's taunting behaviour towards his wife had been cruel.
Bettison had carried out a campaign of abuse that friends and family had witnessed, creating enough evidence to help secure a conviction.
I heard him, this squeaky voice, you silly bitch, you silly bitch. To see what he'd done to a wonderful woman. I tell you what, yeah, it's all fooled, but it didn't fool me in the end, because these walls are very, very thin. Very, very thin. She didn't deserve that. It's awful. Awful. I hope he rots in jail, I'm sorry. I really do.
In a further twist to the story of Keith Bettison, 2 years later, he faces charges of sexual assault against 3 separate women. It's a completely new set of offences for those who knew Bettison to hear about. One victim was just 10 years old at the time of the offences.
Bettison was found guilty. He was convicted of 6 offences and given a further 9-year prison sentence.
Bettison is registered as a sex offender for life.